Hello and welcome to a new edition of Planet Waves TV. My name's Eric Francis Coppolino, the host of Planet Waves FM and the author of the Planet Waves Horoscope. Back in business after a few days of recovering from the Your Future, Your Life readings. More about that in 1 second. Let's see. In Planet Waves news, I am planning to have the July monthly horoscope available for you. You can find that on the front of planetwaves.net. These are not your ordinary internet horoscopes or print horoscopes. They're extended readings for each of the signs and the rising signs written in my literate, erudite, and spiritually aware style of writing with lots of really good astrology for you. Additionally, the new article that will come out with those horoscopes is about the astrology of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. That was the Dobbs decision that came out, I think, on June 24th. I have not had occasion to say much about it, but that is to say, after it was decided, we all saw the draft of the decision that came out in early May. That has never happened before. And also I have a new article on the cover of planetwaves.net and planetwaves.fm. The article is called Don't Look Back. It is an article that focuses on the astrology of January 2020. We all know, if we remember anyway, the astrology of January 2020, which was the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. And then a couple of weeks later, that was followed by a square of Pluto and Eris, Pluto in Capricorn, Eris in Aries. And this got some airplay, over the course of the crisis, the C word crisis that we have all lived through pretty much nonstop for the past 2.5 years, incredibly. However, not much has been said about the actual events in Wuhan in January of 2020, and partly that is because no one knows what happened in Wuhan in January 2020, but my team and I have spent much of the past 2 years figuring out exactly what happened in January 2020, and we're at a whole new level of depth of that, including analyzing the goings-on inside of various labs in China. This article does not go there. What we do look at is the initial steps in the crisis that were not reported in the press because they were only available to people who were reading the scientific literature, or in the case of the events approximately around January 26, 2020, the square of Eris and Pluto, which, by the way, went on clear through October of 2021. So that is why this all lasted so long, is there was this astrological power behind it, and a thing that we had to work out, which I'm not sure has really been worked out. But anyway, the events of late January, say around the 24th, really the 21st to the 31st, all surround the rollout of this campaign, this marketing campaign, this marketing terror campaign that we are still living with. But in any event, this is a major investigative feature. It is 21 pages long. I promise you, when you are done reading it, you will wish that it was longer. Part 2 is coming. It's going to take me a month or two to write part 2. This is based on the work that I've done on the chronology, and all of this is available on the cover of, easier to get to, chironreturn.org, O-R-G, chironreturn.org, or planetwaves.fm. Okay, all of that said, let's let this airplane go by. I'm working out in bucolic High Falls, New York, on this thing that I sometimes refer to as the grandmotherland. That is well, surrounds me on all sides. Really, I'm sitting on it on my friend Michael's porch, and I had to wait for a long time because somebody was power washing the hydraulic system of a truck, and that was an airplane. So it's not always that quiet out in the country. But in any event, okay, airplane has passed by, is flying along the Schwangunk Ridge. So yesterday, today's Wednesday, Tuesday, yesterday in the other direction, was the new moon in the sign Cancer. That was at 7 degrees and change of the sign Cancer. And it was, I think, quite an optimistic new moon in that it was making a beautiful aspect to Jupiter, a square to Jupiter in Aries. I think that the Jupiter in Aries, as the astrology has come, is a pretty helpful influence given all that we've been through and this extreme emphasis on Capricorn that has been going on, which can have a kind of a heavy quality and also a sensation of instability. What I like about Jupiter in Aries is that, in my estimation, so much of what we've experienced the past few years, let's say all of the chaos going back to 2016, and this depending on I was going to say miraculous election of Donald Trump to the United States presidency, which at the time there were a great deal of us watching in some shock that this was even happening, and the way that it was happening. And all of this, I think, and many other things that have ensued since then have been the result of Eris in Aries. Now, Eris in Aries goes all the way back to the 1920s, but it was really stirred up by taking a conjunction from Uranus in Aries, and that took place if I recall correctly, in and right around 2016. And so things have been particularly unstable, and maybe you're familiar with my whole approach to understanding pretty much everything, which is to understand the media environment that we are in, and right now we are living under full digital conditions. Full digital conditions are wonderful in one sense, that I can bring a recording apparatus out to this beautiful place that would have taken a minivan to haul out here 30 years ago, but right now it all fits on the kitchen table. But it has created incredible instability in terms of people understanding who they are, the sense of having any feeling of your own presence in the world, a sense of being an out-of-body phantom of yourself. And these are not pleasant feelings, and part of the unpleasantness is an instability that is often answered by violence and aggression. If you're wondering why we live in such aggressive times, and why people like to drop various peace bombs on you, love and peace and judgment and rage and hatred and love and peace. And this is, I don't think people are necessarily critiquing themselves for this. If you're woke, you're woke, and you don't have any more woking to do, in theory. Is that when we are destabilized by media and other environmental influences, but in particular pushed out of our bodies and taken out of ourselves by all of this overexposure to digital technology, that creates an instability and a lack of self-knowledge, and often that lack of self-knowledge is answered by violence. People use violence, they use aggression, they use their rage and their ability to attack people as a way of finding out who they are. Countries do this, tribes do this, all sorts of groups and companies do this, and individuals do this. And while I am in no way making an excuse for this, I mean, frankly, I despise this quality of life that we have right now, where people who profess to be so peace-loving and being all about fairness and equanimity spend their lives attacking and raging and essentially committing things that by their own definition would be microaggressions, only they're not so micro. This is an effect of being destabilized by digital conditions, and it can get a lot worse than it is. And if you're wondering why there was so much violence and aggression during the crisis of the last 2 years, including people attempting to force and coerce people into do things. This is all about a destabilization and reflects a lack of self-knowledge, a lack of self-awareness that people think they can answer with violence. We're going to need a way around this. We're going to need a different approach to this. Obviously, we cannot live with a violent approach all the time to everything. But I don't see too many of these being experimented with. Also, I would call out the hypocrisy of our moment in terms of a lot of what previously was identifying itself as the health freedom movement is now cheering the fact that a bunch of men in black robes have decided that the courts and the government will take possession over women's bodies. And a lot of people who are angry about the courts taking possession over women's bodies, most of whom don't know that's what happened, but who are angry about some change that has happened that has restricted their freedom of choice, have no moral ground to stand on, because most of them have spent the past 2.5 years arguing that we should not have any influence over our medical destiny or the destiny of our bodies. I would call on people on both sides of this supposed divide to sort this out. The problem with hypocrisy is that it has a drug-like quality, and it creates first of all, it is, I think, an addictive substance. It grants a kind of power that people fall in love with, and really the power is like discovering that someone has the power to cheat at something, and the cheating is holding two mutually exclusive positions at the same time. I'm not sure why anyone likes this feeling. I'm not sure that anyone does like it, except for the power that it seems to bestow. And the problem with hypocritical power is that ultimately it is the power to get over on people by deceiving them and in some way cheating them. That's really what hypocrisy is about. And so, where the tables have very much flipped from where they were a year and a half ago, which was on who was on what side of the bodily destiny discussion, all apropos of Aries and Eris and Aries. And what I was saying here, bringing this back around to what I was talking about a moment ago, is that Jupiter in Aries is providing some sense of substance to what is really a very unstable zone of the zodiac, but also a very important one. Aries has been destabilized, as I said, by Eris, by Uranus and moving through Aries, forming the conjunction to Eris, which very much rewrote the times that we were living in. And then, Chiron is there. Chiron is reminding us of the self-actualization problem that we have. And by the self-actualization problem, I mean doing everything except what would actually assist with self-actualization. Now, ultimately, you know, one way or the other, you get there. Some rise, some fall, and some climb to get to terrapin. However, there are more direct methods and there are more indirect methods to self-actualization. And what Chiron is pointing out is that we have a problem. We have a probable source of that problem, and we have a solution of what we can do to be present for ourselves and gain self-knowledge. And a lot of that being present for ourselves and actually gaining self-knowledge involves coming back to I statements. We are at a point in history where we need to come back to I statements. In other words, not saying you tree over there, you are a racist. That is not an I statement. That is a you statement. An I statement is, I will look at my values as a member of society. I will examine my own privilege. I will assess what I am doing with my prerogatives. Not you must do that. I must do that. And when in various different methods of therapy in the 1960s and 1970s, this was a strictly held to point in the discussion. For example, in group, we had to make I statements, and when the time came to make a you statement, that was an agreed upon thing. Bob, how do you feel about Judy? And then Bob would say, Judy, I think you're mean to me, or something like that. So right now we're not seeing a lot of I statements, and Chiron in Aries is calling us back to the need to speak in I statements. Jupiter, as I said, is granting more substance to this. So you may be able to feel what it's like to feel yourself having a little more of you in the discussion, a little more of you to offer, rather than feeling the sense of your whole foundation having in some way been hollowed out from the inside, or you're being pushed out. Now, one thing that happened, well, wasn't, it's kind of still happening, but was present in the chart for this new moon. By the way, the new moon was here, and here's the square to Jupiter. And as you can see, this is part of a grand square pattern. But at the bottom of the grand square is Logos in Libra, and then Pholus, Quaar, and Ixion in early Capricorn, and then Jupiter in early Aries, powering up the whole equation, but also providing some sense of grounding and stability within oneself. But in the new moon chart, that is revealed as being in short supply by the Mars conjunction to Eris, which is still separating right now. It's still quite close as of this very moment. It is separate by a little more than 1 degree. Mars is at 2610, Eris at 2459. That's pretty much 25 even. Okay, so again, Jupiter in Aries, a little bit more semblance of some ability to stabilize in yourself. Now, the question is, what do you do with that ability once you determine that is that's what you actually have? It does not necessarily mean people will respond to it in a kind or helpful way, or even a self-aware way. That Jupiter in Aries can be full of oneself, so keep an eye out for that as well. Now, the Mars Eris, again, I'll just show you that without taking any more of a sidetrack. The Mars Eris conjunction in Aries, which happened yesterday, has a bit of that. I don't know who I am. I'm therefore going to go after you. This analysis, by the way, can be very helpful in understanding not only things like mass shootings, but how people respond to mass shootings. I am, as you might imagine, skeptical of all of these mass shooting events, which seem to only happen in the United States, and which society does not seem to really be seeking to understand, and about which there are a great many questions, let's just say from a law enforcement perspective, that never seem to get answered. There's always just too simple of an explanation given, or it's supposed to be simple, but it turns out to be too complicated for what it should be. In any event, those seem natural in this time in history. They seem to blend in with the scenery in this time of history because of the problem of disembodiment leading to violent impulses as a means of self-actualization. Now, and by the way, I have been writing about this easily for 5 or 6 years, probably longer, since I learned about the concept from Marshall McLuhan, that all violence is an attempt at a form of self-discovery. We have two issues, I think. One of them is that the lack of self-knowledge problem is getting worse, not better. Digital conditions are deepening, and we are being propelled into this artificial and enhanced and completely synthetic so-called reality at a tremendous pace. As the technology completely, surrounds us and swallows us, and people are spending more and more of their time in this synthesis of reality, not the real thing. But further, there are, as Adrian Rich said, there are methods, but we don't use them. There are many therapeutic methods and therapeutic models that would be helpful and would be very useful as self-discovery tools, but which are generally not used, or people don't avail themselves of them, and it's easy to see why this is. I mean, part of why this is about that it is not as satisfying, or so seemingly satisfying, to study yourself and reflect and do the work of self-knowledge and self-understanding, as it is to join some kind of a hate campaign of some kind, and it's almost counterintuitive to stop and be reflective under digital conditions, because the thing about which we would be reflective doesn't seem to be there, so there can seem to be no point, or the whole notion of self-actualization obviates itself, because what is there to actualize anyway? So these are two troubling trend lines. Let's put it that way. Two troubling trend lines. The increasing potency of digital conditions and the seemingly decreasing usefulness or interest in self-knowledge and self-understanding. Now, at the end of the last video, I had said, well, I'm going to talk about more about Mars retrograde in Gemini, which takes place later in the year. The retrograde itself goes from mid-October to mid-January, and the total time span that Mars is in Gemini is from mid-August through mid-March. And so what we have here is first of all, a phase of time that's likely to be very confusing for people on the sense of self issue, because Mars provides the sense of self, and Mars also provides the let's get a little bit of light here, the violent impulse that would seek to resolve the lack of self-actualization through harming people, through aggression in some way. And the way this looks is, and I see there's a lot of lines. Let's use a simpler chart. Let's use the the Cancer, the chart for Cancer, your future, your life. There's a little bit less going on in this chart. Here's Neptune in late Pisces, and then this is Mars in it will arrive in late Gemini later in the year. But because we know this is happening, it is active and is extant now. And what's going to happen is that Mars is going to hang out all through the autumn in late Gemini, making a square to Neptune in late Pisces. And so this is, I think, a kind of inflammation of the out-of-body, lack of self-knowledge effect of digital conditions. And then the possibility to act this out in destructive and self-destructive ways, which are described by the Mars square Neptune aspect, we got to keep a grip, I think. My hunch about this time frame is that the retrograde of Mars in the autumn is going to serve a lot like the retrograde of Mercury, which took place between February and March of 2020, which was basically a scrim for all kinds of mischief that was going on behind the scenes. And then suddenly one day Mercury stations direct on March 9th, and we're living in a whole new world, and people don't realize we're living in a whole new world. And then on the 12th, Cuomo declares an emergency, and then on the 13th, Trump declares an emergency, and we're still in an emergency. And a lot of that emergency had to do with all kinds of things going on that we were not noticing in the month leading up to it. And so my concern is that the retrograde of Mars, in particularly events late in 2022, are going to be a distraction and a diversion from what is actually going on behind the scenes, that will then essentially start to manifest as soon as Mars goes direct in early January. And then finally, I know this is more of a short-term report, but I think we have to really be looking in the long term when Mars goes direct and then completes its final square to Neptune in Pisces. I'm sorry, there's a little distraction going on inside the house. There are three major planetary sign changes that take place in March. I get that that's about 8 or 9 months out, but pay attention to it. The first thing that happens is Saturn will make its one and only transit from Aquarius into Pisces, where it'll then stay for the next 2.5 years. Mars will go into Cancer. Mars will go into Cancer after having spent 7 months approximately in Gemini. That's the final resolve on the retrograde, and then we get our first foray of Pluto going into Aquarius. And so there is, as far as I can see, between Mars, Saturn, and Pluto changing signs, all within a matter of a couple of weeks, all of them on long cycles. I mean, Mars is only a 2-year cycle, but the retrograde in any one sign is fairly rare. There's a massive sea change that takes place in March, and yet all of the setup for that sea change will be going on in late in the year. And one last thing I'll say, I've only got about a minute left, is that when Mars goes into Gemini in August, we're going to see news stories that are indicative of what's about to happen. We're going to get a preview. In a sense, the ingress of Mars into Gemini will provide an opportunity to essentially predict trends off of events that are there if people are looking. We live in a time when sadly people think either there's no way to find the truth, or I have my truth and you have your truth, and then they're both true. But that whole scene is just not philosophically tenable, nor is it particularly useful if we're trying to find our way somewhere or get through this seemingly ever mounting chaos. Okay, don't miss the horoscope. That's on Thursday night. That'll be right on the cover of planetwaves.net. New article, Don't Look Back. That's on the cover of everything. You can find it right on the cover of Chiron, Planet Waves, or Chiron and Planet Waves FM on Friday night at 10. Thanks, and bye for now.